Woke up this morning, feeling lonely on my bed, and I'm so alone here, feeling over sad. Was a half man, half an hour. Wasn't half man in my bed. Wasn't half man, half an hour. And I always feeling sad.
Welcome to the little theatre of the mind, in the alley just off Main Street. Once again, this is Basil Nightingale speaking, and inviting you to listen to short story theatre. Today's play, written and produced by Bill Russo, is a Western story. It is based on the real-life adventures and misadventures of an unfortunate gunslinger named Sam Bean. He was the son of one of the most famous figures of the Old West, Judge Roy Bean. Let's go now to West Texas and a little town named Del Rio. Here's Short Story Theatre's Matt Larbook to tell us the tale.
It was hot that day, even by Texas standards. The temperature had soared to 104, that's 40 Celsius, when Sam Bean and his wife Juanita climbed on board their buckboard in the late afternoon of May 5, 1907. They were heading for the fiesta in the village fairgrounds in the growing village of Del Rio, in West Texas, about 150 miles further west than San Antonio.
Nita, I'm worn out. Summer is 2 months off, and already the daytime temperatures are above 100. But even with this infernal heat, I got a lot of work done today. By this time next week we'll have the grand opening of the Del Rio Lily, the finest saloon in town.
I guess we're in for a long heat wave, Sam. It shouldn't get this hot until June. It might be good for business though. You'll have a lot of thirsty customers. And they'll have money to spend because the crops won't suffer, thanks to the canals.
And all the cattle will be well watered and fed. When the founders tapped San Felipe Springs and set up the networks of irrigation canals, they gave life to Del Rio. This tiny settlement will probably be a major city by 1925, unless people like that rat, Quiserio Orozco, have their way.
You're always fighting with Quiserio Orozco. Why can't the two of you get along with each other?
Juanita. He's no good. His cantina has been the only watering hole in town for over 5 years. Ever since he found out that I'm going to open a better saloon than his rodent-infested hovel, he's been plotting against me. You know he has. Tools have been stolen, lumber has disappeared, and last week somebody set the place on fire in the middle of the night. It's lucky that I decided to sleep in the building, or we would have lost everything.
It's even luckier that you woke up in time to save your life, and put out the blaze before there was serious damage.
I've never had much luck, Juanita. At least not until I met you. Things are starting to turn around for me now.
I think your famous father had all the luck in your family, and there was none left over for you. Judge Roy Bean had enough lucky breaks and escapes to fill up about a dozen storybooks. When he passed away 3 years ago, Sam, he didn't leave you much money. But maybe you've inherited his luck.
The spirited bay mare trotted smartly, pulling the conveyance along the cactus-lined trail to the fairgrounds. The heat of the day was beginning to pull back slightly, and Sam and Nita were fanned by a gentle breeze coming from the Gulf of Mexico, 300 miles distant. Due to a quirk of nature, Del Rio was the constant recipient of a stream of Gulf winds that retained their moisture during the long voyage from the sea. Unlike much of the surrounding area, the climate of the village was very far from the typical hot and dry, as found in the rest of West Texas. Del Rio was instead hot and moist, almost tropical. It was a combination that made for good ranching and farming. but often left the working men short of temper. From May to August there was a chance that the temperature could hit 100 on any given day, and during March, April, September, October and even November, there was a strong possibility of the mercury topping 90. It was a wet heat that soaked a man from his socks up through his underwear, after which it right to the top of his head. Some of the cowpunchers and other laborers in the area took to shaving their heads smooth, to avoid having to deal with hair that was always as soggy as a wet mop. Sam Bean's brown hair, not completely shaved off, was closely cropped in the new crew cut style that was gaining favor both in the military as well as among civilians. Juanita's thick black hair was swept up to the top of her head, wrapped in a bun, and covered by a large floppy hat. At the height of the May 5th festival, during the dancing, she planned to release the trapped long black tresses, and let her hair tumble in a wavy cascade, from her shoulders down to her waist. When they reached the fairgrounds, Juanita ran to the picnic area to secure a table for dinner, while Sam tended to Mehitabel, their graceful bay. As Sam hobbled his horse in a thick patch of buffalo grass, he noticed a man watching him from a nearby cottonwood tree. He couldn't make out the face, but there was no mistaking what he wore: a black western hat with a white band, black shirt and pants, and black boots that were dotted with silver sparkles. It was Clesirio Orasco. Raging with anger, Sam walked swiftly towards the tree, where Orasco stood in the shadows. Without thinking about it, Sam wrapped his hand around one of the twin Colts that were holstered at his side. He wore his weapons, because he planned on entering the pistol shooting contest that was part of the evening's festivities.
Buenos días, Señor Bean. I heard you had some trouble at your building site. Qué mala suerte. What bad luck. Was there any damage to your property?
You know what happened to Rasco, because you were there. Orasco, that straw you used to set the fire was the last straw. We may as well settle this now. Reach for your gun.
Look, before you shoot the pistola, compadre. No hay pistola. Do you not say that I am not wearing a pistola?
It was true. Orasco did not have a pistol. He never used one. But he did, however, have a knife. The knife was his weapon of choice. And he could handle it like Charlie Daniels handled his fiddle when he fought the devil down in Georgia. Orasco taunted Sam Bean. He said, "Perhaps if you wish to try to kill me later, we could meet near the shooting range, and I will bring my knife to your gunfight." Then Orasco laughed mockingly at Sam, and walked swiftly towards the picnic area, where his wife was waiting for him. Furious, Sam stayed by the big cottonwood tree. He was rooted to the ground, for a full 3 minutes, before he was calm enough to join Juanita at their table. He didn't tell his wife, but he had decided that he would finish the feud with Orasco tonight. One way or the other.
You're listening to Justice Texas Style on Short Story Theater. Today's play is from Bill Russo's novella, based on the real-life Sam Bean, who was the son of one of the most famous figures of the Old West, Judge Roy Bean. This is Basil Nightingale speaking, and reminding you that the Short Story Theater podcast is available on all podcast sites from Apple and Amazon to Zebra. There are almost 100 episodes of dramatized tales available for free. Just Google Bill Russo's Short Story Theater. Many of our shows have also been produced as videos and are available on the Bill Russo YouTube channel. Now let's return to the Old West and the sad tale of Sam Bean. As we get back to our story, Sam Bean's wife Juanita has found seats for herself and Sam, at a picnic table set up at the grounds of the fiesta. Also at the table are Mary and Jim Sanders. And Juanita is chatting happily with them when Sam arrived. The two young couples were discussing plans for the grand opening of Sam's new saloon, when the town blacksmith, Tug McBride, stood up to speak. McBride was a wagon maker of note, and the best harness man between Del Rio and San Antonio, 150 miles east. In 1905, there were 20 million horses in the United States, and only 70,000 automobiles. McBride's harness shop was the busiest business in Del Rio, with two exceptions, the mercantile store and Orozco's Cantina. Let's listen in, as Tug McBride speaks.
Howdy folks and welcome to the Cinco de Mayo Festival of Del Rio City. We got a great crowd. It looks like the whole town is here. Now some of you might be wondering why a big, red-headed Irishman like me is talking about a fiesta celebrating the French being driven out of Mexico by Benito Juarez. The answer is that Esteban Mendoza, who owns the Muy Bien restaurant, was supposed to be giving this little speech, but he asked me to do it for him. He requested that I give the talk, cause he's too busy counting up all the money he made, by gouging 6 bits, out of you ladies and gentlemen, for the sparse meal he's going to give you.
Everybody laughed at McBride's speech, even Senor Mendoza himself, who scurried from table to table, to make sure that everyone had heaping platters of his special pollo y arroz. In English, that's chicken and rice. As a tribute to his Italian mother, he also served soft bread with a hard crust, and albondigas, estilo mama. In English, that's meatballs, mama style, and tomato sauce. Everyone agreed that 75 cents was a tiny price to pay for such a grand meal, especially since it was highlighted by a brand new pie that had been recently invented in New York City.
Hey folks, I'm hoping you're loving the meal. Also, I want to let you know about the new pie that we have made, especially for this event. This pie that I made for you today was first served a few months ago by my Sicilian cousin Guglielmo, back east in the north end of Boston. I hope you like it. It is called pizza pie.
Yes folks, it was the Irishman Tug McBride who first introduced pizza to the Old West. It was in 1907, just 2 years after pizza pie crossed the Mediterranean and Atlantic Oceans, and came to New York and Boston, before slowly spreading out to all of the states of the United States, of which there were 45, up to 1907, when Oklahoma became a state, bringing the total to 46 states plus a handful of territories. The pizza pie, consisting of sauce, meats, and cheese baked on top of a circular-shaped shell of bread dough, was the hit of the fiesta that day, especially since it was served with the recently introduced Mexican beer celebrating the new century, Siglo XX, in English that means, 20th century. The beer was first brewed in 1900, and later when the Spanish word, siglo, was dropped, it was renamed Dos Equis, XX, meaning in English, double X. The schedule for the remaining daylight hours included rifle and pistol shooting contests as well as a few cow-punching events. At dark, a glowing bonfire set ablaze would signal the start of the music and dancing. Sam was one of just 3 sharpshooters to get a perfect score in the first round of the quick draw and shoot contest. He hit all 6 of the glass bottles thrown up in the air in front of him. The winner of the second and final contest would receive a shiny new $5 half-eagle coin, made from pure gold. Ted Clapper, Gawk Larkspur, and Sam Bean were told to stand about 3 feet apart from each other on a line drawn in the dirt. In turn, each had to shoot at a cluster of tiny teacup saucers thrown high into the air. The shooter hitting the most of the 10 plates thrown would be the winner. In case of tie, the procedure would be repeated for as long as it took for somebody to win. Dad Clapper went first. Over 70 years old, Clapper served as a lieutenant under Grant in the American Civil War in the 1860s. He was missing both pinky fingers, as well as the lower part of his left ear. The grizzled vet didn't talk about it much, but other old-timers reported that Clapper had got his injuries while battling the Comanche in the Indian Wars. Clapper was ancient but still could handle his pistols as well as almost anybody in Texas. "Throw," commanded Tug McBride. A split second later, brightly colored saucers flew upwards, and spread outwards, as they took flight. Clapper drew his twin Colts at lightning speed, and fired so fast that the blasts almost sounded like a single shot. When Tad was done, he holstered his weapons and waited for the cloud of smoke to clear, so that he could watch the scorekeepers and throwers, as they picked up the few saucers that he missed. The keeper of the general store, Brace Beezer, was in charge of adding up the count, and he yelled out the score to the eager crowd.
There's 3 that ain't broke. That means old Tad got 7 out of 10. Score 7 for Tad. That's gonna be awful hard to beat.
Gawk Larkspur was up next. Barely over 18, the sandy-haired youth was very fast on the draw, but his accuracy wasn't on a par with his rapid pull. He wore twin Colts, and could draw his weapons like lightning, from his right hand, or his left hand, or both at once. Gawk bristled with nervous energy, and then he yelled, "Throw!" Gawk Larkspur hit only 5 of the teacup saucers, despite firing 12 rounds, alternating his twin Colts, in a split second. Then Sam Bean took his place on the firing line. When the saucers were tossed, he quickly filled his hands with his twin Colts. Brace Beezer shouted out the score.
You got 'em all! Every single one! Hot dang! He got 10 plates and they only fired 10 rounds! Nobody could have done better than Sam Beam, not even Wild Bill Hickok or even Buffalo Bill Cody.
With a lot of backslapping and celebratory handshakes, Tad Clapper, Brace Beezer, and a group of 8 or 10 other shooters, led Sam Bean to a makeshift bar that the saloon keeper, Cleserio Orasco, had set up near the target ranges. "I ain't drinking with Orasco," Sam proclaimed as the men stuffed him into a seat at a table beside the bar. "That stinking rat tried to burn down my place. He doesn't want me to open my saloon and he'll kill me if he can." Orasco, his face shaded by the brim on his black Stetson with the white band, smiled when he heard Sam's comments. "Sam Bean, why do you accuse me of this crime? You have no proof of it. Why don't you spend some of that half-eagle you just won and buy everyone a drink?" Sam ended up buying several rounds. And with each new glass, his anger grew until finally he said, "Orasco doesn't use a gun, boys. He favors a knife. I've got a pretty good idea that one of these days he's going to throw it into my back if he gets the chance. I think I'll fix it so that he can't." Without another word, Sam Bean drew both of his Colts and snapped off a shot that tore into Cleserio Orasco's right arm, about 3 inches below the shoulder. Even before Orasco had a chance to scream, Sam took aim with his other revolver and shot off Cleserio's right earlobe. Everything happened so fast that nobody could make a move. As if hypnotized, 20 or more men watched in silence as Sam Bean fired 12 shots. 1 in the arm, the second in the right earlobe, the third tore off Orasco's black Stetson as well as a swatch of hair and a bit of scalp. The brutal 4th shot went through the back of Orasco's right hand, exiting through his palm. Sam turned his attention to the bottles of whiskey, and shattered 8, emptying both of his revolvers. After the final round was fired, nobody moved. Except Orasco. With his useless right arm, and his bloody right hand dangling by his side, he walked haltingly towards the table where Sam Bean was smiling at the gory results of his marksmanship. Orasco smiled through teeth clenched in pain, and slowly said, "You made a mistake, Malandro. I am not right-handed. To slice with my knife I use my left hand, like this." From beneath his shirt, Orasco drew a long dagger, that witnesses would later call a Bowie knife. When he got within a foot of Bean, everyone expected him to slash Sam's throat. But instead, he wound up, and thumped him on the top of the head with the flat of the blade. Sam's eyes rolled, and he nearly lost consciousness as the heavy knife struck him with a loud splat. As blood began to drip down his face, Sam raised his hands in a defensive posture. Orasco slashed at the hands, opening deep wounds.
You were the great shooter today, Sam Bean. But now you will see what a good knife can do. A good knife must be heavy enough to use like a hatchet. I demonstrated that my knife has that quality when I bashed you on the head.
Bean was cradling himself with his arms, and seemed only partly aware of what was happening. Blood seeped from his head, and blood flowed freely from the wounds on his hands and fingers. Stunned, the other men sat in their chairs without moving as Orasco spoke again.
A good knife also must be sharp enough to use as a razor. I could give you a shave right now, Melandro. Perhaps I will.
Instead, Clesario Orasco waved his knife in the air and brought it down under Sam Bean's chin, and then Orasco slit Sam Bean's throat.
Woke up this morning, feeling lonely on my bed, and I'm so alone here, feeling over sad. Was a half man, half an hour. Wasn't half man in my bed. Wasn't half man, half an hour. And I always feeling sad.
When the witnesses to the bloodbath at the Del Rio Fairgrounds shook off their stupor, they arrested Orasco and held him on charges of murder. A judge from San Antonio was brought in for the trial. When he heard that Sam Bean fired 12 rounds before Orasco drew his knife, the judge said, "Senor Orasco is not guilty. The defendant acted in self-defense, and I think it is fair to say that he will go down in history as the only man to demonstrate that
You can bring a knife to a gunfight."
And so closes the real-life tale of the unfortunate Sam Bean, son of the famous Texas saloon operator and judge, Roy Bean. Sam was killed on the 5th of May in 1907, at age 32. Sam and his father, Judge Roy Bean, are buried side by side in a cemetery in Del Rio, the city where Sam died. This is Basil Nightingale, speaking for Bill Russo and Short Story Theatre, saying, thanks for being with us and join us again real soon. Won't you?
The music heard on today's play is heard through the courtesy of the group Loco Lobo. The title of the song is Half Men. It is available on YouTube.
Woke up this morning, feeling lonely on my bed, and I'm so alone here, feeling over sad. Was a half man, half an hour. Wasn't half man in my bed. Wasn't half man, half an hour. And I always feeling sad. Woke up this morning, sun is shining on my bed. The birds around here outside, screwing up in my head. Was a half man, half an hour. Was a half man in my head.